Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be before the committee tonight. I'd like to introduce the folks who are with us. To my right, your left is our MTA Board Chair, Gail Carr-Williams. To my left, your right is our Chief Financial Officer, Ed Oliphant. And having heard Director Crumbo's remarks earlier about the pending retirement of Talia Lomax O'Neill, I also have to announce Ed is planning to retire in June, which has led the director and I to wonder what they know that we don't know. So that gives us some pause and concern. Also in the room is our Chief of Staff and Administration, Vince Malone, and someone you all know very well, our Director of Legislative Relations, Eric Beyer. So thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Again, my name is Steve Bland. I'm the CEO of the Nashville Metro Transit Authority, doing business as WeGo Public Transit. Last year, we were very grateful that Metro was able to increase our operating budget allocation by just over $13 million, or approximately 21%. This allocation included granting our full request for baseline funding support to maintain service continuity, and our investment request by the mayor's office, and an additional allocation made in the council amendment process to allow us to start new service in Bellevue to serve the new James Lawson High School. This allocation allowed us to continue to advance necessary service expansion initiatives as contained in the Metro Nashville Transportation Plan adopted by the Council in December 2020. All of the phased improvements that were included in last year's budget have been implemented in two phases. The first phase went into effect in October of 2023, and the second and most recent phase in March 2024. These new service enhancements have included extended service hours on our routes 3, 4, 6, 7, 22, 23, 42, 50, 52, 55, 56, as well as WeGo Access, our door-to-door service. Increased frequency of service on routes 7, 8, 75, and 77. Midday and Saturday service for the first time on Route 75, our Midtown Crosstown connector. Sunday services for the first time on Route 75, the Midtown connector, and the 77 Wedgewood Crosstown. New WeGo Link Zones, our mobility on demand program in the Burton Hills, Rosebank, Brickchurch Pike, Old Hickory, and Bordeaux neighborhoods. And extensions of our Route 9, Metro Center, 14 Whites Creek, and 41 Golden Valley to serve the new Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Center. And finally, two new routes, the Bellevue Circulator that I mentioned earlier, as well as the new 71 Trinity Lane Crosstown. These enhancements and other overall service improvement have allowed Nashville to be among the nation's leaders in ridership growth and post-pandemic ridership recovery. Through March of 2024, year-to-date ridership is up about 10% over last year, with many of our major routes showing extremely robust ridership growth. As an example, our 55 Murfreesboro Pike service, the busiest route in our system, is currently operating at over 130% of pre-pandemic ridership levels, now carries over 5,000 riders each day. Overall, 15 individual bus routes are showing double-digit rates of increase, including the Route 79, the Skyline connector route that was initiated last year and is up about 26% overall in ridership year over year. Other noteworthy activities over the course of the year were continued construction on the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Transit Center, where we hope you'll join us for a dedication ceremony on June 18th. We continued to see growth in the use of our quick ticket contactless fare payment system and increasing utilization of its fare capping feature by our riders. So a way for our riders to save money without even having to think about it. There have been upgrades to an additional 20 stops with accessibility improvements and passenger waiting shelters this year. And we have many more in various stages of design and construction. Next month, in fact, we will celebrate the completion of our 300th sheltered stop, about triple the number we had 10 years ago. Unrelated to this operating budget, you heard both Ms. Pomeroy-Wallace and Director Crumbo allude to the capital spending plan. This was also very significant for WeGo Public Transit. Allocations made through the most recent capital spending plan will allow us to continue to fund a robust fleet replacement plan where we are seeing supply chain challenges starting to ease, and we're in the midst currently of accepting delivery on 40 new vehicles for our access system and 28 new vehicles for our fixed route system. In fact, those of you who attended the Mayor's State of Metro address last week were able to see one of those brand new fixed route vehicles on the dais. So we were pleased to be able to do that. This year, we expect to also begin design on the Antioch Transit Center and to finalize joint development negotiations for a transit center upgrade, as well as a mixed-use development project at Donaldson Station. And with respect to both of these projects, we were able to realize significant awards of competitive federal grants, a bus discretionary capital grant for Antioch, and a federal community project discretionary project grant award, a mouthful, for Donaldson, which was spearheaded by Congressman Rose. Bringing us to the upcoming budget, we knew through the course of budget development that Metro would be facing constraints in the growth of major operating sources, limiting the amount of growth we could expect with respect to general fund operating support. In our original operating budget request, we requested an increase of $6.5 million in support for MTA services and $371,830 for RTA services, which were entirely to support increasing expenses associated with the WeGo Star commuter rail service. This request to support an increase for the Star was the first requested increase from Metro since the Star began service over 15 years ago. In general, the baseline increase request for MTA was intended to cover inflationary increases, including pending compensation increases for ATU Local 1235 employees whose collective bargaining agreement is due for renegotiation this year. Full year operation of new services started during the middle of the current fiscal year, and operating expenses associated with the opening of the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Transit Center. We also requested investment funding to continue service expansion as called for in the 2020 Metro Nashville Transportation Plan. Overall, our investment request was just under $8 million to support partial year operation of an overall package of $10.6 million in service improvements, including improved frequency on routes 6, 8, and 18, more robust service to the Nashville International Airport via an extension of the Route 55 Murfreesboro Pike service along Donaldson Pike, and a new route in Antioch connecting the Southeast Community and Global Mall redevelopment site to the Century Farms area, where we are seeing increasing demand for service, particularly among employers at the Tanger Outlet Mall down there. When added together, MTA and RTA requests for both baseline funding and service expansion investments, we requested just under $14.9 million in additional funding for FY 24-25. Certainly very significant and would have represented an increase of almost 20% over the current fiscal year. Overall, the mayor's recommended FY 24-25 allocation provided for an increase in MTA baseline funding of $2,675,000, or about 3.5%. Overall, this fell below our baseline funding request by about $3.8 million, but our full baseline request for RTA funding was recommended in the mayor's budget. Recognizing that council will soon be considering Mayor O'Connell's Choose How You Move transit improvement program, as was alluded to by Ms. Pomeroy Wallace, we certainly understand the need for fiscal restraint under the current general fund operating budget and the need to preserve funding for other key community services. Despite the shortfall in baseline funding, we do anticipate being able to hold both fare and service levels consistent for the upcoming year, so there would be no negative impacts on our customers or our employees through adoption of the mayor's budget. And we'll do that largely by, first of all, curtailing costs in other areas, as Ms. Pomeroy Wallace alluded to, tightening our belts in other areas, as well as reallocating some of our federal capital dollars, which is allowed by federal law, from our bus replacement program, thanks in large part to the robust capital spending plan allocation, and moving that into preventive maintenance line items for the upcoming year. I would hasten to add, though, that this approach is a short-term fix, and in large part, we are able to do it because of that CSP allocation. So it will leave us with a structural issue that we'll have to examine depending on the outcome of Mayor O'Connell's Choose How You Move initiative. Unfortunately, the recommended level of funding will also mean that we'll have to defer any additional service expansion for another year. Frankly, that's not entirely a bad thing, as it will allow us to catch our breath a little bit and get our hiring back up to speed and just generally be able to sort of recalibrate the system. Finally, before I turn it over for your questions, I know in the news, I'd be remiss if I didn't comment on two significant security incidents that occurred in our system over the past week, and to highlight the outstanding partnership we have with Chief Drake and the Metro Nashville Police Department with respect to system security. First, at approximately noon on Monday, May 20th, 2024, a female passenger boarded the Route 56 Gallatin Pike bus near the intersection of Broadmoor and Gallatin Pike. She boarded the bus in what appeared to be an agitated state, speaking loudly on her cellular phone. Passenger and bus operator exchanged a few words upon her entry, but the exchange did not appear to be in any way hostile. The bus operator took no actions that could be interpreted as being provocative. Passenger began yelling at the operator, pulled out a knife, and reached around the operator's protective barrier, began to assault her with a knife, inflicting cuts on her hands and arms. Bus operator somehow managed to secure the bus and alert radio control via the onboard emergency alert system. Emergency medical services, Metro Nashville Police, and WeGo Public Transit Security and Operations Supervisory staff were on the scene within 7 minutes for first responders and 15 minutes for our supervisory staff. Police quickly identified the assailant and arrested her. The bus operator was transported to the hospital where she was treated for her wounds and released on the same day. Following this incident, employee meetings were held at our Nestor operations facility to convey information to employees, to listen to their concerns, and to offer the services of our agency's Critical Incident Support Services Unit, which is part of our broader employee assistance program to serve those affected by the events. This incident followed another completely unrelated security incident on Thursday, May 16th, when two men engaged in an argument on the steps outside the Elizabeth Duff Transit Center at WeGo Central, with the argument resulting in a shooting where one man shot the other. No uninvolved parties were injured during this incident. Within 2 minutes, our on-site security and Metro Police staff responded to the incident. Police officers quickly apprehended the gunman, and the gunshot victim was transported to the hospital. The proximity and time of these two extremely serious and disturbing incidents is highly unusual and not accurately reflective of the overall safety of a system that carries approximately 30,000 riders each day, or a facility at WeGo Central that sees approximately 15,000 visitors each day. With that said, the two unrelated incidents certainly raise the level of public awareness of issues surrounding the operation of public transportation in what is becoming a major American city. Eric Byers in the back of the room, he has a much more extensive information sheet, background on our security practices, so certainly any member who's interested in that information, we would appreciate it if you would avail yourself of that. And with that, Madam Chair, we look forward to your questions.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for what you all do to keep the city moving and to give people options to be able to travel around the city, and we definitely appreciate that. My daughter is a frequent rider of one of those bus routes that you've named today. So again, thank you for what y'all do. I saw Councilmember Councilmember Benedict had a question, and I see Councilmember Parker. I see Evan Siegel. I see Allen. I see Spain. Anyone else in that first round of questions? Okay, and I'll kick us off. I have one quick question, and then I'll save my other two for the end. Can you tell us how much revenue we generate from ridership?
Sure. First of all, I'm not going to let Ed out the door completely unscathed before his retirement. So a lot of the detailed financial questions I'll provide to you. But if you look at the one-page kind of overview under program revenue, you'll see those trends. Charges, commissions, and fees is largely the passenger revenue of about $12,576,000. Ed, you may have additional detail that you want to share.
Okay, thank you. So if if at some point in time in the future, the city decided that they wanted to offer free fares for the city as a whole, then will we be looking at about 12 million that would need to be supplemented, or how, could you just kind of speak to how that works? I know myself and a couple of other council members have been interested in that, and we've been seeing some interest from constituents as well.
So certainly that would be a baseline amount. What we've seen from other experiences of systems that have started to implement some of the free fare programs is we would also want to model where we currently see capacity issues, because we would expect that to generate at least episodic, if not overall increases, where we'd likely have to deploy some additional service hours on the street in order to address that demand, and potentially some ancillary types of expenses, such as security expenses, where some of the systems that have experimented with are kind of seeing those impacts as well. But that's certainly something we could model.
Thank you. And one more follow-up question based on that. Would the increased ridership then open us up for additional like federal grants or federal funding that could possibly offset some of those costs?
Some, for sure. The federal formulas are determined largely on several factors, our federal formula assistance. One is population, two is population density, three is the level of service. So as we're able to increase service hours, that drives it. And ridership does to a certain extent. Ridership is actually one of the smaller, believe it or not, is one of the smaller factors. It's actually population density that tends to drive that formula the most.
Okay. Thank you so very much.
And I would add to that, in both Director Crumbo and Ms. Pomeroy-Wallace alluding to the Choose How You Move plan, when you see that final plan with the audited financial plan, factored in there is some growth in those federal formula dollars associated with both increasing service levels and increasing ridership levels.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Councilmember Benedict. I don't know why I keep wanting to call you Councilmember Evans. Councilmember Benedict, you're recognized.
Maybe we'll swap seats. Do you want to? No? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bland, and thank you to your entire team at WeGo. I've got a couple things. One, the Broadmoor-Gallatin stop and the incident there, that actually is the stop that I used. I used it today. I used it yesterday. That is where I board the bus, and I see hundreds of users a week at that site as well, taking the 34 or the 56. Thank you for the quick attention to that. Great job to that driver. My thoughts are with her. Of course, for our first responders as well who showed up. I think that safety is something that I've seen concerns from the community, from parents with their students. And I think that what you guys are doing at WeGo is addressing that. And I just would ask for you to continue to focus on that. Make sure that your funding does include enough to push out public messaging in regards to how safe it is to ride. I feel safe when I ride, but these incidents do occur from time to time. We're dealing with the public, so it can happen. I do want to thank you for allowing certain classes of e-bikes being allowed to be on the buses this year. That was an excellent addition to it. And then I guess the question that I have for you, based on, you've had variable revenue from us in the past. You've never had dedicated revenue. I hope that next year we'll be sitting here having a different conversation. Is there, I wanted to just call out, great job on that, but really the main reason I wanted to speak up tonight was in regards to that safety issue at Gallatin and Broadmoor. Thank you for that update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. And I'd want to highlight the outstanding relationship we have with Chief Drake and Metro Nashville Police. And, not even with, we contract through the secondary employment unit for supplemental police support. But frankly, the support we get just through general patrols from our precinct commanders has really been outstanding, and they always go above and beyond.
Thank you so very much. Next up, we have Councilmember Parker, who is also the chair of the related committee. So my apologies, Councilmember Parker, for not acknowledging you sooner, but we do have the chair of our infrastructure committee here with us, and you are recognized.
Quite all right. Thank you, Chair. Chair Porterfield covered part of my question, which was about fare revenues. And I had an additional question, if you can provide even an approximation here, or you can get it to us. What is the breakdown of like institutional rate payers, like partners who fund service for their employees or their students or something like that? What is the breakdown of those institutional rate payers versus the just an individual rate payer with a quick ticket card? Do you have that off the top of your head for that 12-ish million?
I think we have that off the top. Ed, you're such a disappointment. That is absolutely information we can get to you. half his legs are in Montana already. But we can absolutely get that information to you within the next 24, 48 hours.
Thank you, and that would be helpful because, yeah, we are getting, at least myself and as Chair Porterfield expressed, we're getting a lot of conversation about fares and fare-free, and I just, in talking with y'all in recent years about this question specifically, I have come around to the idea that, you know, for our system today, this is not necessarily the top priority to improve service, is to go fare-free right now. But I do think that, especially with additional revenue, hopefully coming online and other things, that this conversation will continue. So I'd love to know sort of that institutional versus individual breakdown. And then in the meantime, if we're successful in November with securing dedicated funding, I know that we've talked about, and I keep bringing this up, but we've talked about having a subsidized fare program or a free fare program for low-income folks. And if we're not going to do a broader overhaul of fares broadly through the system right now, I just want to make sure that that program is casting as wide a net as we feel we can reasonably cast, and also that it's extremely accessible. So like someone who doesn't have a driver's license or access to much documentation about their self or their financial situation can walk into a some kind of place and get access to those fare cards. Maybe it's Central or something, not a payday lender, someplace that's not predatory, and get access to that service. So casting a wide net and making it very low barrier, wide net in terms of qualifications and low barrier in terms of, we're not means testing the heck at everybody who walks in, and maybe some people who some would deem undeserving are getting access to the program. But I think that by casting that wider net, making it super low barrier, we're gonna capture a lot of the folks that we want to assist with that program. So I'm just gonna keep repeating that in meetings, and I'd love to continue the dialogue with y'all about how we'll implement that program.
Absolutely. Yes, and to your point, that program is absolutely an element of the Choose How You Move initiative, would be one of the quickest wins, for lack of a better word, very short term to implement. And frankly, we'd be looking for the input of certainly council members, but also a lot of our social service agency partners on the easiest way to administer those programs, to your point, to make it easily accessible. And then the other factor I touched on in the opening remarks is we are actually seeing people starting to, as they're converting over to quick tickets, starting to recognize the benefits of fare capping. So under fare capping, when you open that account, no matter how much money you put on, if you put it on $2 at a time or $5 at a time or $100 at a time, you're automatically upgraded to the most cost-effective fare for you, whether it's a day pass, a weekly pass, or a monthly pass. So Ed sort of laments the fact that, we're seeing some loss of operating revenue as people are. So as he gets a little frown on his face, I get a little smile on my face as a result.
And so as I understand that, if I am putting $4 or $5 on my card at a time, at a certain point in a calendar month, if I've put in enough if I've spent enough in fares to buy myself a monthly pass, it just upgrades me to a monthly pass. I don't have to put any more $2 per ride in.
Right.
And that's how that works.
Correct.
Okay,
On the daily, weekly, or monthly basis, once you hit the price, once your account has hit the threshold for whatever that pass would have cost, you will not be charged any more for any additional rides in that time period.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Parker. And I ditto all of his questions. You couldn't see me, Director Bland, but I was nodding ferociously, fiercely, whatever, back here. Could you just clarify one thing with that capping? Does it notify the individual that they have now hit the monthly pass or the weekly pass?
It does when they tap. So for instance, using the day pass example, a day pass is $4. It's $2 to get on the bus. The first time you tap, notify, $2 taken out, your ride's approved. Second time you tap, $2 taken out, ride's approved. Third time you tap, it would be no charge, ride approved. And also there are very robust, if you go to your account tools, whether it's on the app on your phone or on the online web, there's quite a bit of information available to users about, what their usage is or what their account balances are, how close they are to various savings thresholds.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if I would love if there was a way to make sure that that information is widely available to people, because people may not realize, you may not catch the bus for the third time because you may think that you have to spend another $2 and you don't have it. But then knowing that you've paid for the day, you may decide that you do get on again. So if we could just kind of make sure that and it sounds like you all are doing a great job. If we could continue to do that, that would be awesome. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to take credit for our communications, but I think the best advertising for it has been the word of mouth, as people have sort of discovered it and told friends and family and everyone else that this is happening, that we're starting to see that kind of take off.
Advertisements at the bus stations, advertisements on the bus. I mean, I think announcements on the bus, I think all of those things could also be beneficial, but we appreciate y'all. Council Lady Evans Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I think you'll probably find there's clearly a theme to all of our questions tonight, so sorry. On the question of institutional versus individual riders, I ride the 7 a lot. And I've noticed, for example, Vanderbilt, ton of ridership, off and on, into downtown, up and down through there. I haven't noticed that with other colleges in that area, and I'm not sure sort of citywide. I think on the institutional front, and I think also when the state went partly remote, we lost some ridership. Right. And so I just was kind of wondering what sort of outreach we might be doing. I know it might be hard for, say, Lipscomb and Belmont because the 17 only runs every 45. So maybe that's why kids aren't using it. But, and I guess the 75 too. But I'm just kind of curious what is happening with the institutional riders.
Yeah, we have with the expansion of the WeGo Ride program this past year to Tennessee State, Fisk, and Meharry. We now pretty much have all the significant colleges and universities, significance a bad word, the largest institutions are involved in that program. We've actually seen significant ridership growth, particularly at TSU, Fisk, and Meharry, since it's been a brand new program. To your point, without a doubt, the level of service you have adjacent to your campus, so more remote locations are going to be a little bit trickier. And I think it's one of the reasons we've had some success at TSU. There's a good concentration of service in North Nashville. In large part with all of our WeGo Ride partners, we do promote the program broadly on board and at shelters and what have you. But in large part, we do rely on our institutional partners. In that regard, we've seen tremendous growth in the program. We've had about a doubling, aside from the colleges and universities, overall the employer base has also expanded by about double. Vanderbilt, in large part, is it's certainly the largest, what I'll call private WeGo Ride partner in terms of ridership. We have other programs like our partnership with the Homeless Impact Division, that probably generate a bit more ridership. And actually the medical center is probably the dominant, the university carries large numbers as well, but the medical center, and certainly, frankly, they were a huge base of ridership for us through the course of the pandemic. When we dropped about 2/3 of our ridership, they were probably a pretty significant percentage of the remaining 1/3. But definitely it's something that we want to get, word out on. And it might be worthwhile when we provide the information that Councilman Parker asked about with respect to the institutional, we can put together a little fact sheet for the members on who the partners are, what levels of usage we're seeing, in those sorts of metrics.
That'd be super helpful. And I know Vanderbilt's a good partner. My kid goes to daycare at a Vanderbilt daycare, and they actually took WeGo on a field trip last week. So they really take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. But I know there's a lot of, you see it outside the downtown core, out-of-state cars and their students, and they might not really need that car if there was more uptick at some of the other institutions. And I think you mentioned modeling out what free fare would look like. And I think my next question on that is that something that can be done with current staffing, or would you need to have some sort of extra money to get a consultant in to do that, or a grant?
To model the potential impacts, that should be something we could do internally. Frankly, what we would likely do, obviously the revenue loss impacts are pretty easy to calculate, splitting out again what individual, fare payers would be versus institutional. Then the other thing we would look at is where we're seeing either routine or episodic. If we make assumptions as to what level of ridership growth we might see with the elimination of fares, we would identify those quarters where we might have to put out supplemental service resources. And there has been a bit of literature, not an extreme amount of literature, but a bit of literature put out nationally about some of the other cost impacts. So it wouldn't need to be an exhaustive or a tremendously expensive research effort, but something we should be able to do internally.
That would be great. And I think my other question, I think you answered, but I just want to make sure that there's pretty massive increase in federal funds, it looked like, in the revenue. Is that the Congressman Rowe's funds that you're talking about, or is that coming from somewhere else?
Do
It
you
looked
have
like
the
a-
breakdowns, Ed?
Maybe like a $4 million increase year over year in federal funding or something?
This might be the allocation of the PM. Yeah, this is, as I alluded to earlier, the way we're sort of addressing the baseline funding piece is taking federal capital money that would normally be in our capital investment program and flexing it over to the operating budget through those preventive maintenance line items. Typically, our federal dollars are not eligible to be used for operations. There are two exceptions to that rule. One is for our ADA mandated paratransit service. We are allowed to use federal capital dollars toward that, as well as certain line items that are identified with preventive maintenance of federally funded assets. So the logic was, if we give you $1 million to buy the bus and you can't fix the bus, it's sort of a problem. So we have certain line items in our budget that are eligible for that participation. The challenge with that approach long-term, we've relied on that source pretty heavily over the years, is it obviously can compromise your capital plan over time, as a one-time thing, particularly given the level of funding we saw in the most recent CSP. It's really not an issue. It's certainly not a habit we would want to get into long-term.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Evan Siegel. Moving right over, Councilmember Allen, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity to take the 77, I think it was, from Wedgwood to the soccer game, which was fantastic. So is there in this budget included, hopefully, continuation of supporting those venues as well as I hope, a robustly growing process for the Titan Stadium as we lose parking over there?
Yep. Certainly, this budget contemplates continuation of the initiatives we have. We'd love to continue the partnership with Nashville SC, who are helping to have us underwrite free fares on the 52 and the 77 associated with their game day events, as well as the supplemental service that we run from Antioch and Murfreesboro to those games. And I see Director Alarcon in the back, and she and her team and I and our team and the Titans and Metro Planning are engaged in all the conversations, both short and long term. I think we actually had the Titans CEO, Burke Nihill, speak to a transit conference here in town, and he got a tremendous response when he said, we want to change the question from where do I park to how do I get there? And that has certainly been the gist of the conversation that we've been having with the Titans. So we're cautiously optimistic. We ran some experimental services with dedicated lanes for the Morgan Wallen shows at Nissan Stadium that, with a little tweaking, we were actually very pleasantly, I won't say pleasantly surprised. We were optimistic going in, but as a fatalist by nature, I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I was pleasantly surprised by the outcomes, and I think that's some success that we can build on, certainly as we move toward both short-term with spaces lost during construction and then longer-term as the East Bank gets built out.
Yeah, good answer. And then second, I'm excited to hear about possible additions to the airport transport. I think, it makes a whole lot of sense to use buses instead of waiting for a monorail to appear magically and affordably. So will that include more frequent travel? Is it possible we could ever get to like every 15 minutes and then let people know that it's there? Because I think people would jump on it if we could get that frequency up.
What we put in the budget proposal, we won't be able to do this year, but what is absolutely in the Let's Move Nashville program would be 15-minute service on the airport variant of the 55 Murfreesboro Pike, which accomplishes very robust service to the airport, obviously, and that essentially would be running 24/7. So that would be included in that 24-hour day service expansion. The other thing it does, to be honest, is helps us address some of the, I mean, even as much service as we have, we're running every 10 minutes on Murfreesboro Pike. We still do see episodic overcrowding on that route, even with articulated buses. So if you think about it, it's 15 minutes service to the airport combined with 10-minute service to Antioch means that if you're inside Donaldson Pike on Murfreesboro Pike, you're probably seeing a bus about every 6 minutes. So that really kind of would help with that. In addition, if you look at the Let's Move Nashville plan, the airport becomes more of a center of activity. And I want to give thanks to Airport Director Doug Crullen and his staff. We've been working with them very closely on modeling and trying to get WeGo Ride into the airport employers and what have you. But in addition to that, the plan would call for an additional crosstown route that would connect via Donaldson Pike, the Murfreesboro Pike corridor, the airport, Donaldson Station, and ultimately over to the Opry Mills area.
How long will that take? Is this 10 years down the line or maybe soon?
Ask me on November 6th.
Okay. I'm voting for it. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Spain, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. Back on the security issue, I was just looking at the list of requested funding increases, and there's a fairly sizable increase for security, and they're about 42%. Can you talk about what that's for?
Yep. Yeah, most of that is allocated. We're assuming some increase in our contract expenses with both our allied, our contracted security firm as well as the MNPD secondary employment unit. But most of that expense increase is associated with the opening of the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Transit Center, where we will have a 24/7 security presence on that site.
Got it. And also, post-pandemic, I know we were having a hard time recruiting and hiring enough bus operators and mechanics to keep the vehicles running. How are we doing there?
We are definitely catching up. So to this point, frankly, and this is starting to abate some, most of our challenges with service delivery or service reliability have been more on the fleet side with some of the delays we've had in the supply chain. We really haven't had the issues with staffing. We are not at full staff. But I think on the operator side, we're at about 95, 96%, which is strong. And we are picking up on the maintenance side as well. I have to give a credit. Vince is in the audience. Part of his staff is our training program. And they've really done a great job completely revamping both what we refer to as WeGo Academy. So that's new folks coming in to become bus operators. It used to be you pretty much had to have a commercial driving background. And we were finding that tree was about barren. So now with WeGo Academy, you can come in with really no, if you haven't driven anything bigger than a Prius, as long as you have a good driving record, we train you full up even to get through the commercial driver's license process, obtain your CDL and get the endorsements you need to operate. So that's been successful. And also they revamped our maintenance apprenticeship program. If you are a technician in any field and you can't find a job, you just are not looking because everybody's hiring. So we realized several years ago we're going to need to grow our own, as much as we are to hire. So we are actually now, after about 3 years into the program, seeing graduates starting to come out of apprenticeship and going onto the line. So we're starting to see relief there. Having said that, I will tell you our operations and our training and our HR groups are probably breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief if we get a little bit of downtime this year to, catch up some of those programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Spain. Councilmember Prepty, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this information and for the presentation. My question might be more appropriate for next fiscal year, but it's top of mind for me right now in contemplation of the transit referendum and the expansion of services and building new transit centers. My question deals more about sort of the capability of having wraparound services at these new facilities, because a number of Metro Council members and on the minority caucus were approached by an individual discussing a lack of access of hygiene facilities for individuals and a lot of people who utilize WeGo in our transit system. And so my question is, has there been any contemplation with these new potential facilities of facilitating having wraparound services at those facilities and for having hygiene facilities within those new transit centers, so having areas where a person could essentially take a shower? Has there been any contemplation about those, including those kinds of services moving forward as hopefully as we expand beyond once we do the referendum for dedicated funding?
Right. Specifically, hasn't been a lot of conversation about, quote, wraparound services. What the approach our board has taken is that each center, needs to be reflective of the neighborhood or the area that it's in, and there has to be a very active and aggressive neighborhood engagement process. And I think that approach has served us very well in North Nashville, where we had very active and involved community engagement and what we want to see and what we don't want to see, and certainly in the conversations we're having with council members down in Southeast Nashville about Antioch, that would continue. So that's not to rule us out. It's not to say that, I guess I would communicate it as if you've seen one neighborhood transit center, you've seen one neighborhood transit center. So, one that might be in Donaldson might have different services or different, joint development opportunities than one that might be in Antioch or North Nashville or up in Upper Dickerson Pike or what have you. But that's certainly a conversation we're open to. And in the Let's Move Nashville, I'm sorry, I'm regressing back to, some of us remember that. In the Choose How You Move initiative, certainly there's a contemplation that those transit center sites would be able to serve more than just the transportation facility. So whether that's housing or it's commercial development or community services or wraparound type services, that there would be that space. As Law Director Dietz is quick to point out, we can't use Improve Act money to build those, but certainly by having the land and the ancillary transportation services available, that would be a high return on investment type of an approach.
Thank you. Yes, and I think it'll be important to contemplate having some kind of hygiene services that are able to be facilitated there.
Great point.
That I think that is also sort of a public health issue as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pripty. Do we have any additional questions? I have two. As we've been having conversations around transit-oriented development and increasing density along the transit lines, have you all been having any conversation about putting housing on top of any of the transit centers? So we've been kind of having some different conversations in council and would love to hear if you all are having any of those conversations.
It's definitely occurring. I know it was discussed earlier in the mayor's office presentation about East Bank, certainly having housing built above the East Bank Transit Hub is an opportunity. We're also hoping to start feasibility planning on the Sobro Transit Center later this year, and that certainly also presents an opportunity for that type of development. And again, I would say with any of the centers, it's, well, and certainly even with North Nashville, even though our site's constrained, the adjoining land that's ripe for redevelopment would certainly be an attractive location for that type of activity. So what I'm encouraged by on that front is up until 2 years ago, I probably couldn't name an affordable housing developer in Nashville. And in that ensuing period, I probably had lunch with almost all of them who were both asking us about what we're doing and telling us about what they're doing. So I do think you're going to see more of that activity in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then my last question is, I know you said with the not being able to quite fulfill the full budget request, that could slow down in expansion of services. What is the I guess, plan when the bus routes aren't going like all the way to the county line. So I'll just give the one that I'm familiar with. The 55 goes down Murfreesboro Road, and then it goes up Bell Road to their last destination. But if you are from Bell Road to the county line, then you don't have any access to service. And I do know that we have the first mile, last mile program that not everyone knows about. And I've heard from some constituents that they don't feel comfortable with using. For example, if you're sending your child to school, you may not want to put your kid on an Uber to get them to the bus. So if you all could just talk about like what that looks like, not just in Antioch, but around the county as well, but what those services to the county line look like.
Yep. Yeah, the further out locations in the county are definitely a challenge, both because of population density, the development trends, and also the street network and walkability. WeGo Link is kind of growing. We're also looking at other models of it. Generally in our industry, it's referred to as micro transit, so more the door-to-door types of approaches. So even beyond the Uber, there are other providers, including potentially ourselves, to do those types of more on-demand, even if they're app-driven services. The challenge when we were operating a lot of those, what I'll call very circuitous routes through some of those areas are, as a user, it's a very long ride because of the circuitous routing. And as a result, it's very low ridership at relatively high cost. So what we're trying to do is balance those activities. Having said that, in the Choose How You Move program, if it's enacted by the voters, there are essentially placeholders for new services in the outlying parts of the county that could be, certainly part of it is an expansion of our, what I'll call our commuter-oriented services, so express-type services from places like Antioch or Jolton or the Rivergate area, directly into the city with connecting points at transit centers around the city. Could be circulator bus routes, similar to what we run up in Madison or what we run down in Bellevue. Could be the on-demand types of services. And again, I think a lot of that will be kicking off pretty shortly in cooperation with NDOT and Metro Planning, an update to the strategic service plan. So a lot of those we'll be hashing out with individual communities as we go through that process.
Thank you so very much. Councilmember Evans Siegel, and then Councilmember Evans.
Sorry, that just triggered, as you go into that process, I will say one of the things that I get asked a lot about is that sort of not just last mile in Davidson County, but really that commuter service outside the county. Had a woman reach out to me who was complaining that WeGo didn't take her relative to the Walmart she worked at Murfreesboro Road. It took me a minute. She said the woman had to walk 1.5 miles, and I realized she had to walk 1.5 miles because she was hitting a county line and she was walking to the Laverne Walmart, right? There are all these, if you kind of, I'm not recommending this to anybody, but should you dive into like Reddit Nashville, there are a bunch of threads of people moving to Cool Springs who are working in Nashville and trying to figure out how to get around because they are coming from Boston and they've never owned a car. And so I really look forward to seeing that strategic planning, but very mindful that I grew up driving from here to Franklin. There used to be farms and now they're not. It doesn't stop anymore at the county.
Exactly. I think one of the advantages we have in that regard, so Choose How You Move would build up, obviously the conundrum is, if you're a Davidson County taxpayer, one argument could be, well, this plan isn't regional enough. The other counter argument would be, well, should we be using our tax dollars to pay for services outside the county? What I do think that this program does is build very robust service to the county line that makes it much easier for those surrounding counties to connect to at a much more affordable price, number one. And that's something that was reflected even as recently as last week with the Regional Transportation Authority Board of Directors that's largely composed of our regional mayors of the surrounding cities and counties, recognizing that the plan would support a robust regional system. The other piece that I think is an advantage is that WeGo Public Transit is really both. It's Metro Transit Authority and the Regional Transportation Authority. So the mechanism to deliver those services as, additional counties come online is very, and that's reflected in, Your quick ticket card can be used on the train. It can be used on a Clarksville commuter bus. And it can be used on a local, Nashville service, so that to the user, as we're able to build that network out and expand services, that experience can still be very seamless. Same thing with WeGo Ride, like employer or school and university partnerships that, we have Metro Nashville school kids riding the WeGo Star in from Donaldson to go to UMFOG High School, as an example, so.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Evans. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Your questions about WeGo Link prompted me to, I guess, ask a couple more questions related to that, because I'm one of the council people that lives in basically a transit desert, because I have no sidewalk and no connection to a bus stop. WeGo Link does not extend to where the majority of the residents in my district live. And even with redistricting, I picked up an area that's in even worse shape because they're too close to Wilson County. They're closest to Mount Juliet. And so essentially people that may have services that they're using in Mount Juliet that are within a couple miles, they're just over the line though. And so they are not able to even make that connection. And Mr. Byer was helpful in at least trying to socialize, like, how could we figure out how to get somebody to dialysis that's 2 miles away, lives in Davidson County? If they went to a Davidson County location, they'd have to go to Bellevue instead. So those are just a couple of examples. But I guess I was thinking about, in relation to the transit referendum, when I was looking at the link information, like one of my thoughts had been like, well, at least if it were, I feel like there's a lot of residents where it would be perceived value for expansion as opposed to like, I'm really going to give up my car and use Link to be able to get to the train or the bus. And so kind of related to the voucher, how does the voucher aspect connect to a hard cost as part of the current programming? And then also like what the future might hold. Is it perceived value by some residents? Are there a lot of active users? Like, I guess I don't know, like I have my perception about it based on the residents that I serve, but I was curious about how that translates into money for you all.
Yeah, it's growing in use. I'd be less than truthful if I told you it would ever be a huge percentage of our ridership. And it's largely going to be folks for whom it happens to work. And that's broadly how I would characterize mass transit. There's no expectation that, we put all these services in place and 90% of everyone in Davidson County is going to ride transit everywhere they go. It'll be episodic. We have what we refer to as our all-purpose users, people who use it all the time to go all over the place, work, school, shopping, church, you name it. We have, commuters who use it back and forth to go to work and pretty much drive everywhere else. And then we have the occasional. I might ride the train to a Titans game or, what have you. So that's sort of the context that we look at it in. Going back to the WeGo Link zones, we're happy to talk to any council member about zone definitions. And I know as we've emerged those zones, when people have identified, hey, there's a housing complex here that's just over the line. So we've been able to make those accommodations, and those can be done pretty quickly and pretty affordably. We sort of have a target for zone size and proximity to service. If you connect a zone to a bus route that doesn't run very often, frankly, it's less than ideal, but that's certainly a conversation we would love to have with individual members about their particular districts.
Here, I've got one follow-up related to that. So I guess trying to think about this too, and happy to talk more offline about it. I guess from an expansion perspective, then what would be the harm in saying everybody in these rural areas has access to Link from a messaging perspective, thinking about a referendum?
Well, in the Choose How You Move program, there would be, I won't say countywide access to WeGo Link, but countywide access where there is not a decent public transportation service. So we're not going to say, oh, you can have WeGo Link to get from, a hotel on Lower Broadway to, because frankly, that'll be a cost buster if, all of a sudden every Uber trip in the city were subsidized by MTA. But if you're in Jolton or you're in, Antioch or you're in Hermitage, for sure in those corners of the county. And again, particularly as we're able to build out a more robust, what I'll call express network to those outlying parts of the county, now all of a sudden you can connect those outside areas to something that's more viable. So instead of kind of meandering 2 hours on this local route that kind of tries to hit every corner of the far edges of the county and then come into town, it's more of a direct trip to a connecting point, hopefully at a transit center or at least a park and ride facility, to a more robust express service that can get you into the city, into the rest of the network quicker.
Thank you. And I guess, and to be clear, I will say I wasn't suggesting like, let's make WeGo Link the, MTA supported Uber for like within the urban core for sure. But I'm also thinking ahead, like we talk about, kind of with schools, it's like getting younger
Yes.
people to learn about all kinds of things when they're young. And then it becomes like voting. It becomes a behavior, that then they implement if they see their families do it. And so I guess I would just encourage maybe if we could think about like these outlying areas like mine that, and I'm sure there are other CMs in here, probably Councilmember Webb and Kimbrough that have similar situations where it's like we have people that vote, but at the same time, like they can look at a plan like what's coming and think, this doesn't impact me. But if we could get people just used to the idea that I can connect to transit. And so that's where I go back to the perceived value, even if they're not always implemented. And I don't know if you've got minimums on like how many voucher codes are out there, or if they're different and kind of getting into those details, but that just stands out. And so I thought I'd mention it since it's been something I've been
that's a
thinking
very good
about.
point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have just one final question, and we will go ahead and wrap this up. What services are available for people who don't have access to maybe computers or smartphones to be able to buy digital tickets?
So the quick tickets available either is through the online app or through a hard card. I think we're up to well over 100 outlets now, including significant retailers like CVS, Dollar General, that sort of activity. Obviously, they're available at Central. We're also building out more of a network of ticket vending machines. So all the rail stations have them, all the transit centers will have them, certainly at WeGo Central. And then you can manage that account on that. So you can take your card, for instance, to WeGo Central, tap it on a ticket vending machine, see what value you have on it, same types of things you can see on a computer or on or on your smartphone app, you'd be able to see on ticket vending machine. And also through our customer care unit by phone. We get a lot of inquiries via our customer care center about quick ticket accounts, whether those are issues with quick ticket accounts or I lost my ticket, I lost my card, I need to deactivate it and get a replacement card, or those types of things. There's always going to be that human contact as well.
So if I'm just random person, I walk up to the bus stop on Murfreesboro Road near Murfreesboro and Thompson Lane. I want to hop on the 55 to go downtown. I don't have a cell phone. I would then walk to a dollar store or somewhere around there to look for a place that would sell a card to be able to get on the bus.
Right. First point of contact to use it, you would have to have the physical card. Again, which you can get from the retailers or from us or a ticket vending machine. Then once you have that card, you have all sorts of remote options to do things like reload it or auto load it or what have you.
Okay, thanks. My last question about that. Are there, like if I walk up to the bus stop, are there signs on the bus stop that will say like how often that bus runs, but also where within, maybe a half mile vicinity I can walk to go buy a ticket? Because my concern would be if someone doesn't have a smartphone, they only have cash, they don't have a debit card, and they are now trying to access this bus service. And to be transparent, I don't know how often that happens, but I'm trying to think of people that may not always have the same resources as everyone else and just making sure that they have access.
So one of the things we do with our customer surveys, and we do a pretty complete customer survey about every 2 or 3 years, is one of the questions we ask is access, not just to cell phone, but to smartphone, which is sort of the key. And I think I'll verify this. I know current ridership based on the most recent survey is well over 80% do have access to smartphones. So the number of folks who don't have that access, honestly, is declining very much. The direct answer to your question is the new signs we're installing, we're in the process of replacing all of our bus stop signs with signs that are more informational, that have the route number, the route name, the direction of travel. Also have QR codes. Again, you'd need the smartphone to be able to access the QR code that will give you access to real-time information about next bus arrivals as well as fare information. So links to the quick ticket page, including on that page where there are sales outlets for those products.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out this session. Thank y'all again for all of your work, keeping us moving in the city. We appreciate what you do. And colleagues, we will now go into our
Thank you.
last session. Thank you. We will now go into our last